Hello, I'm Bob Kann. I'm a professor of education and a professional storyteller. This presentation is part of a series of videos on the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction website as part of the information provided to explain the benefits of DPI's 4-year-old kindergarten community approach program. The website includes a list of 54 benefits of that program identified by Carolyn Hoffman and myself through a series of interviews with people working in the program, descriptions of those benefits, stories from people working in the program, and a presentation I gave at the Preserving Early Childhood Conference in March of 2013, in which I discussed how to use those benefits with different target populations. In this presentation, I'm going to tell you a story to share some of my thoughts about the value of having these benefits on DPI's website, also to serve as an introduction to some of the basic techniques of storytelling, which can be used for any presentation, and to raise the question, how do you tell just the right story for just the right occasion or with just the right audience? This story is called The Bullseye. At the end of the 18th century, the person considered the best problem solver in all of Eastern Europe, the best teacher, was known as the Maggid of Dubno, the preacher of Dubno. He traveled all around Eastern Europe, going from village to give advice. People came from far and wide to ask his advice, and he always could solve their problems. But he solved their problems in a very peculiar fashion. He always could solve their problems by telling them a story. No matter what the problem, he seemed to have just the right story to solve that problem. Well, one of his followers, who had been traveling with him from village to village, nowadays what we would call a student teacher, finally couldn't take it anymore. And he said, "Master, how is it you always have just the right story for just the right occasion?" The Maggid thought for a moment. He looked at the young man, he shrugged his shoulders, and he said, "Let me tell you a story." He said, "There once was a young man who lived in a village, a sharpshooter. He was the finest shot who had ever lived in this village. He was such a good shot, his parents did something that never before had been done in the village. They sent the young man away to the military academy. And so the young man walked through forests and fields until he arrived at the military academy. And for 4 years, he studied the military arts. He studied strategy, he studied riding, he studied marksmanship. He proved to be the finest sharpshooter who had ever attended the military academy. After 4 years, he graduated with honors, and it was time to return home. Again, the young man walked through forests and fields until he came to a clearing, and he saw something that stopped him dead in his tracks. He saw a barn, and on the side of that barn, he saw targets, hundreds and hundreds of targets. And right smack dab in the middle of each target was a bullet hole, a bullseye. And the young man started walking toward that barn, talking out loud to himself, saying, "I'm a great shot. I'm a fantastic shot. But I never could get a bullseye on every single shot. I wish I could meet the person who could shoot like that." Well, there was a little kid hanging out next to the barn who overheard him. He said, No, mister, that was Shepsel. He's different." "I don't care, different or not. I'd like to meet this Shepsel fellow." No, mister, you don't understand. Shepsel, he's really different." "I don't care, different or not. I'd like to meet this Shepsel fellow. I'd like to shake his hand." "Look, mister, let me explain something to you about Shepsel. You see, Shepsel, he doesn't paint the targets and then shoot the bullets. Shepsel, he shoots the bullets and then he paints the targets." And so it is with me. It's not that I always have just the right story for just the right occasion. No. When I hear a good story, I store it in the back of my mind because I never know when I'll find just the right occasion to use that story to solve the problem that I'm working on. I have been an educator for 38 years. I've worked with small children in preschool programs, and I've worked with college graduate students. I've come to believe the wider variety of techniques that I have to draw upon, the bigger the bag of tricks, if you will, that I have ideas or techniques to pull out of, the more likely I am to be able to pull out just the right technique or idea for the problem that I'm working on. The 54 benefits on DPI's website for the 4K Community Approach program are a fantastically rich collection of good ideas that are now accessible and available for you to pull out, to pick and choose as suits your purposes, to introduce people to the program or to persuade them to participate in the program. And one way to share those benefits is through storytelling. Because storytelling has the power to touch the heart in ways that are difficult to approximate in any other way that we communicate as human beings. And if you can touch the heart, you can produce change. Now, one particularly effective way to share a story, if you're trying to convince someone of something, or if you're giving a presentation for that matter, and you're trying to share a message or persuade an audience to do something, one particularly effective way to do that is to pose a question at the beginning of the story. If you're going to pose that question at the beginning of the story, of course you've got to answer it somewhere toward the end of the presentation. You could do that by having a moment of reflection. You could summarize your key point, but somehow you've got to address the question, well, what does this all mean? In the story, The Bullseye, in response to the question, how do you tell just the right story to just the right audience for just the right occasion, the Maggid explained you collect many good stories and then you pick out the story that best serves your purposes. I would encourage you to read all 54 benefits, then pick and choose the benefits that best serve your purposes. Here's one final storytelling tip. The building blocks of storytelling are challenges, struggles, and resolution. Quite often, a particularly interesting story will have a person, a group of people, or an organization facing some kind of challenge or a series of challenges. They go through a series of struggles to try and achieve or accomplish those challenges, and then toward the end of the presentation or story, you find out, well, did they succeed or did they fail? If you are somebody who's been working in a 4K Community Approach program, you've undergone a series of challenges and struggles to get your program launched and to get it operating as effectively and as efficiently as it's currently operating. And that would be an interesting story for other people to listen to and for you to tell.